and moving into the 20th century or the modern period. Here is an overview of crime and policing in the 20th century. So there were many improvements in policing, particularly with relation to technology. Obviously, this helps with both crime prevention and crime detection. Policing improved massively after the Victorian period, partly as a result of the failures of the Jack the Ripper investigation and the lessons learned in how they could have done it better in order to catch him, but also partly due to improvements in technology. For example, you've got police radio, meant that police didn't need whistles and therefore could coordinate more effectively. This helps you catch criminals in the act during a foot chase and things like that. You've also got DNA, 99.9% accurate, very useful in courts in terms of the trial process, and it's irrefutable. It cannot be denied. It's easy to collect from bloody scenes, and you can even get it from hair follicles. And obviously, this is continually improving the further into the modern period we get. We've also got the fact that police begin to use motorbikes and cars. This means police can respond to emergencies quicker, improve response times to crime, but also one downside of this could be that it means less police actually patrolling the street. However, they might be patrolling in cars rather than on foot. So this should act as a visible deterrent in terms of, when we're talking about things like traffic crime, because there's police cars on patrol, but also it reduces response time to crimes. You've also got PCSOs, visible deterrents, police community support officers, people who wander patrol around parks and things like that, looking for antisocial behaviour. However, they don't get treated with much respect, and they are treated a lot like the Charlies would have been prior to them. You've got helicopter and infrared. This helps with detection. Criminals can't hide during a chase, usually related to traffic crime, joyriding and burglary and things like that. You've also got CCTV, which helps with both prevention and detection, because people won't commit crimes whilst being watched by a camera, but also it helps to catch criminals after the event in terms of crime detection. This evidence would then also be used to get a conviction during a trial. You've got the use of fingerprints, everybody's fingerprint being unique and stored on databases, which can then be accessed by multiple police forces across the country. People do start to wear gloves to avoid detection. However, fingerprints are still useful for catching opportunistic crimes, as in crimes which are committed suddenly in the heat of the moment, because people see an opportunity to benefit. You've also got the use of computers and databases, which allows police to spot recurring patterns, MO meaning modus operandi, how a crime is committed. You've also got computers and databases which allow for quick communication between police forces and cross-matching, seeing where crimes have been committed in one area, then looking at where they're committed in another area and seeing who could have been in the area at that time. The 20th century also sees a huge amount of changing definitions of crime, mainly due to the fact that attitudes in society changes. This leads to the criminalisation of things which previously had not been illegal. For example, you have conscientious objection. Obviously, the context of this is that World War I and World War II happened, and during that time, people were supposed or conscripted into joining the army, and refusing to became a crime. People refused to fight in World War I for a variety of reasons, political, moral, and religious. Prior to World War I, not joining the army was not a crime. However, in January 1916, the British government introduced conscription. This meant people were forced to join the army or told to join the army, and refusing to do so was now a crime. The reason this law was introduced was simply that soldiers were obviously dying during the war and needed replacing. During World War I, conscientious objectors persecuted both by government and by society, but we'll do a separate slide about conscientious objection. Another crime is cowardice in the face of the enemy. This is because attitudes towards trauma were unsympathetic. Men were forced to fight in world wars, sometimes developed post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, and on occasion this meant they were unable or unwilling to follow orders during battle and were unable to continue to fight during the war. This was seen as cowardice, and the punishment was execution. You would be shot by your own side, effectively. You'd be tied to a post and shot by a firing squad, a group of men with rifles. You also see the growth of traffic crime, obviously because we've got the new technology of cars and motorbikes. So, did not used to be dangerous, but technological developments meant cars could travel faster. This necessitated new laws to keep people safe, or new legislation to keep people safe. Speeding, to an extent, is a social crime, because if you're going 33 in a 30, people tend not to be too outraged by it. However, if you're going 70 in a 30, then the public becomes annoyed. So to an extent, speeding is a social crime and is tolerated up to a certain point. The growth of traffic crime is also linked to the growth of new technology. For example, using a mobile phone whilst you were driving used to be accepted in society. However, over time, they started to see a pattern that this caused lots of crashes and injuries, and therefore society's attitudes changed due to these deaths and injuries, making it illegal to now use your phone whilst driving. You also get race crime. In general, among society, crimes related to race were generally accepted. For example, slavery. This was obviously due to colonial and imperial history. However, as Britain in the modern era, in the 20th century onwards, became more multicultural, attitudes towards race crime began to change, both in society and in law. However, you do still get cases such as Stephen Lawrence and Anthony Walker, who were murdered in the 90s and 2000s respectively. Their murders highlighted institutional racism in British police and damaged the reputation of police, leading to a lack of trust from some communities. You've also got the changing definition of crime with regards to domestic violence. Before the 20th century, men were seen as superior to women, and problems in the home were seen as being between a man and his wife and should be sorted out between the two. It's not even something you would discuss with the rest of your family. What changes in the 20th century is where you get female campaigners, women's, sort of offshoots from the women's suffrage movement and the growth of feminism. Women could now report abuse accusations and abuse and rape, and are now treated and reported upon more sensitively. You also get patterns of crime. These happen due to a combination of factors. As you can see from this graph, you've got crime in the 1900s, and it looks like it steadily increases until 1992, until now. This makes it look like in the 20th century the world got more dangerous. You were more likely to be a victim of crime. However, there's a combination of factors. The police became more efficient. Therefore, it will look like there's more crimes because they're simply better at catching criminals. You've also got the fact that there are new crimes being committed, for example, traffic crime. So there will be more crime, better policing, and also the fact that simply the population grew. So a bigger population means there will be more crime because it will go up accordingly, won't it? You've also got, in the early modern period, still generally most common crime was sort of petty theft, people stealing in order to survive. However, this will change later on in the modern period as the motive for the crime generally becomes greed and wanting to keep up with neighbours and have more desirable products and lavish products to compete with those around you. So theoretically, there's more crime in the 1900s. However, improved sentences and court procedures meant that more people were in prison. So it will look like more crime is being committed because we've got more people in prison. But it's also due to the fact that there's improved sentences and more people being found guilty due to the court procedures. After the war, you've got the 1980s being a time of excess and 1990s consumer culture. This leads to things like greed, and also in addition to that, you've got things like drug addiction, which lead to crime as well. You've got crimes still being committed due to poverty to a certain extent, but the welfare system, as in benefit payments, ensure it is not to the same degree as before. The other reason why people might feel the world is less safe in the modern period is simply the role of the media sensationalising crime, just like they had done in Whitechapel during Jack the Ripper. Media sensationalising crime and making people feel more unsafe.